Stay away from my daughter!" Camille shouted. She bolted, her eyes locked on the door that led to freedom. But as she ran past the man, something sharp caught her arm. He grabbed her roughly, spinning her around to face him. His grip was like iron, but Camille's mind was sharp. She slammed her elbow into his stomach with all the force she could muster. For a moment, he stumbled back, and that was all the opening she needed. Without thinking, she bolted for the door, throwing herself toward the back of the house. She could hear him cursing behind her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Her daughter's life was on the line. Just as Camille reached the door, a hand gripped her shoulder. She twisted in a panic, but the man was there, too fast. He pulled her back into the house with a brutal yank. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" he growled. The force of his grip left Camille breathless, but she managed to spit in his face, the act of defiance enough to make her feel like she still had some control. "You're not going to win," she said, her voice trembling, but her resolve was stronger than ever. "I'll fight you until the end." The man wiped his face, his expression darkening. "I like your spirit. But it won't save you." He grabbed her by the hair, dragging her back toward the living room. Camille's thoughts raced. She couldn't let him get to Zaria. Not now. Not when she was so close. Just then, a loud crash came from upstairs. Zaria had made her move. Zaria was no longer hiding. She had heard her mother's cries, and in the chaos, she had taken action. Her small hands gripped the family's emergency baseball bat, a makeshift weapon she'd found in the closet. "I told you to stay upstairs." Camille shouted, but she was interrupted by the man's wicked laugh. "Oh, look. The little girl thinks she can save the day," he said, amused. He turned, and in that moment, Zaria swung the bat, aiming for his legs. The impact knocked him off balance, and Camille rushed forward, her hands gripping his arm and pulling him away from Zaria. She had never felt more alive. This was the fight she'd been waiting for. The man's rage exploded as he threw Camille against the wall, knocking the wind out of her. But Zaria was quick. She swung the bat again, hitting him in the ribs. The man grunted, more in surprise than pain, but it was enough. The strike gave Camille the opening she needed. She tackled him to the ground, with every ounce of strength and determination she had. She wasn't going to let this man destroy her family. The man let out a wild yell as Camille's weight drove him to the floor. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down, as if the world had frozen, giving Camille just enough time to catch her breath. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew she had to act fast. She wasn't strong enough to overpower him physically, but her mind was still sharp, and that was her advantage. "Get off me, you filthy!" The man spat, his rage echoing in the air. Camille tightened her grip on him, refusing to let go. But he was stronger, angrier, and more determined. His hands shot up, grabbing her by the neck and squeezing, lifting her off him. She gasped for air, her vision blurring. "Not so tough now, are you?" he snarled. Everything inside her screamed for her to fight, to break free. But her body was weakening, her strength slipping away with each passing second. The world was growing darker. Her daughter was watching, terrified. Camille had no choice but to stay alive. Zaria. The thought of her daughter was the only thing keeping Camille conscious. The little girl was brave, but she shouldn't have to deal with this nightmare. Not now. Not ever. The pressure on her throat intensified. Camille clawed at his hands, her nails scraping against his skin, but it wasn't enough. Desperation surged through her veins as she realized she was slipping. The edges of her vision started to fade. And then, like a spark of electricity, a surge of adrenaline shot through her. The world came back into focus. She wasn't going to let him win. Not after everything she had fought for. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Camille twisted her body, aiming for his vulnerable side. She slammed her knee into him with a sharp blow. The man hissed in pain, loosening his grip for just a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. Camille reached up, grabbing the small kitchen knife that had been knocked to the floor earlier in the chaos. Her fingers wrapped around the handle, and with a sharp motion, she plunged it into the man's side. He screamed, the sound filled with rage and disbelief. His hands flew off her neck, and he staggered back, clutching at the wound. Breathing heavily, Camille scrambled to her feet. Her throat felt raw, and she struggled to stay upright, but she wasn't done yet. The man was injured, but she knew he wouldn't give up easily. Zaria stood frozen in the corner, clutching the bat. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she didn't move. Camille's heart twisted. Her daughter had seen more than any child should have to. "Zaria, listen to me," Camille called out, her voice shaky but urgent. "Get to the neighbor's house. Now. Don't stop. Don't look back. Go." The man growled, eyes narrowing. "You think you can get away from me? No one gets away." But Camille's mind was already working, calculating the quickest route. She didn't care about him anymore. She cared about her daughter. She had to make sure Zaria was safe. Zaria didn't hesitate. She turned and ran toward the back door, her feet moving as quickly as possible. Camille had to hold him off just long enough for Zaria to escape. The man, now clutching his side, rushed toward Camille, his anger blinding him. He swung a wild punch, but she dodged, using his momentum to her advantage. Camille pushed him into the kitchen counter, sending a bottle of wine crashing to the floor. Everything seemed to happen in a blur as Camille fought to keep him at bay. She had no weapon left, only her strength, her will to survive, and the knowledge that Zaria was out of the house. The man lunged again, but Camille was ready. She used the momentum of his charge to drive him into the wall, where he crumpled in a heap. He wasn't finished, though. As he struggled to rise, he grabbed a shard of broken glass from the fallen wine bottle. His eyes burned with fury, and he lunged toward Camille with a guttural scream. But at that moment, the sound of sirens pierced through the house. The man hesitated, momentarily distracted by the sound of approaching police. It was just the opening Camille needed. She lunged forward, knocking the shard of glass from his hand and pinning him to the ground. "You won't get away with this," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. But Camille's determination burned brighter than any fear. She wasn't going to let him hurt anyone else. The sirens grew louder, and she heard the door to the front of the house bang open. "Police! Hands in the air," a voice commanded. The man froze. For a moment, Camille thought it might be over. But he wasn't done yet. With a snarl, he attempted to break free, pushing against her with a last-ditch effort. But it was too late. Two officers burst into the room, their guns drawn. "Freeze! Hands up!" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking between Camille and the officers. Realizing the game was up, he raised his hands slowly. His defiance crumbled in the face of the law. The officers rushed in, securing the man in cuffs. "You're under arrest for attempted murder," one of them said, his voice calm but firm. Camille, barely able to stand, watched as the officers took control of the situation. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, but she felt a sense of relief wash over her. It was over. Her daughter was safe. She was safe. The officers quickly checked on Camille, making sure she was unharmed. Her arms and neck ached, and her head throbbed, but she was alive. And her daughter was safe. Zaria stood just outside the door, watching, her face pale and shaken but relieved. Camille went to her, pulling her into a tight hug. "We're going to be okay," Camille whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "We're going to be okay." As the man was taken away in handcuffs, Camille felt the weight of the night's events start to lift. The terror, the chaos, it was finally over. She could breathe again. And as long as her daughter was by her side, she would never let anything tear their family apart. The next morning, Christmas Day, Camille and Zaria sat together at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the windows. The Christmas tree was still standing, its lights twinkling softly. It wasn't the Christmas they had planned, but it was one they would never forget. And in the quiet moments of peace, as they sipped their warm drinks, they knew that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. Their bond was unbreakable. The nightmare was over. And they were safe. As the days passed, the shock of that Christmas Eve slowly faded into a distant memory, but the bond between Camille and Zaria grew even stronger. What should have been a peaceful holiday had turned into a nightmare, but it had revealed the depth of their love for each other. Camille had always been a strong, independent woman, but she realized, in the moments of struggle, that her greatest strength was her daughter. And Zaria, though shaken, had proven herself to be brave beyond her years. The police investigation had continued into the following weeks. The man who had terrorized them was now behind bars, facing charges for attempted murder, burglary, and several other crimes he had committed in the past. But for Camille and Zaria, the finality of the situation wasn't about the justice system, it was about healing and moving forward. They returned to their home, their haven, but now with a renewed appreciation for the little things. Camille made sure to keep her daughter close, offering comfort when needed, and teaching Zaria the importance of resilience, no matter how terrifying the circumstances. One evening, as they sat on the couch, watching a holiday movie together, Camille looked over at her daughter, a soft smile on her face. "You know," she said quietly, "you were so brave. I'm so proud of you." Zaria met her gaze, her eyes filled with gratitude and quiet strength. "I learned from you, Mom." In that moment, Camille realized that this Christmas wasn't just about surviving, it was about growing stronger as a family. She hadn't just protected her daughter, together, they had survived the unthinkable and come out on the other side with an unshakable bond. The Christmas lights still flickered on the tree, but now they were a reminder of the love and courage that had carried them through the darkest night. The nightmare of that Christmas Eve would eventually become just a part of their story, a chapter they would one day tell in the quietest moments of their lives, when they were ready. But for now, they were together. They were safe. And that was enough. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. Check out the videos on your screen now for more thrilling tales. Stay safe and see you in the next one.